All right, well, each week we like to break down the big political stories of the day. There really is kind of just one big story to talk about, so let's bring in CTV's political commentator Scott Reid this morning. Remotely today, Scott, a blockbuster day yesterday. That resignation of Chrystia Freeland, I mean, the number of elements, facets to it, plenty of development since we talked yesterday, just about 24 hours ago. Let's just get your sort of top-line take on this before we dive right in.
So, first of all, completely unforeseen, completely unpredicted. I think one of the things that's most astonishing about yesterday's developments is how it began with that letter going public on the day that the fall economic statement was due to be delivered. Over the course of the many hours of yesterday, you started to think and start to realize how deliberate, how intentional that letter was. Chrystia Freeland left her meeting on Friday with the Prime Minister, decided she'd had enough, composed that letter, decided to orchestrate it on the morning of the fall economic statement without warning. So all of it was crafted very carefully to cause really tremendous harm, deliberate damage to the Prime Minister. And so we begin today now, still asking the question, is this survivable? Will he make it to the end of today? Will he make it to the end of the week as Prime Minister?
Yeah, that is the big question, Scott. And, you know, you picking up on the timing of the delivery of her letter, for lack of a better comparison, it's like flipping your finger to the boss before you kind of quit. Let's talk about Trudeau now and what happens. There seems to be two messages. He's considering his leadership position. We've got a lot of MPs within his own cabinet calling for him to step down. They've taken their holiday break now, but what can we possibly see going forward from this point?
So I know that yesterday was an astonishing day politically. I can think of only one in my adult life that compares with it when Mr. Chrétien fired my old boss, Paul Martin, from cabinet. There was that kind of drama, that kind of confrontation where you're like, well, what will happen next and how can this unfold? It was that sort of day. Here's the thing, though, that I found really strange about yesterday. The Prime Minister never seized the day. He never seized the moment. He never seized the message. He never addressed the nation. When he finally appeared last night, it was at a fundraiser. He sort of just mailed in a speech. It was kind of a stock speech, you know, with a slight nod to the developments of the day. Today he's going to meet his national caucus. Today the House is due to rise. The session ends. My belief is that you can only explain the indecision, the mixed messages, and the silence by assuming that the Prime Minister has actually decided that he's going to leave. Because if you were going to stay and fight, you would have held a news conference at 12 o'clock. I would have gathered Nick and Jen and made you stand behind me and say, we're there with pom-poms, and I would have declared my intention. The fact that he didn't, the fact that he's remained silent, the fact that National Caucus is occurring today, when we know, as you say, the caucus members are calling for him to step down, my working assumption is that the Prime Minister will announce today that he's going to prorogue the House, then he's going to call for leadership. He'll remain as Prime Minister on an interim basis until a new Liberal leader is selected. That's my working assumption, because that's the only thing that makes sense about the way that the card's been played. Now, if I'm wrong and he decides to fight, I think he's going to face a fierce backlash from his own caucus. The number of voices that have called for him to step down will multiply.
Yeah, and I mean, from the opposition as well, you know, talking about the government in disarray, falling down, you know, calling for him to resign, et cetera. So it leaves us in this position here, Scott, where a day, you know, once today's finished, the House rises. The biggest threat, though, right now to Canada is the incoming presidency of Donald Trump, January 20th, which is a week before the House returns. And then you have all the premiers yesterday gathering, trying to create some sort of solid plan to come up with to sort of take on Trump and these tariffs, et cetera. They look like the ones speaking with the more sort of solidified, you know, Team Canada approach here, and the Prime Minister is kind of like left to the side here. How does this look to the outside world as Canada as a functioning or non-functioning democracy?
Well, I mean, these things happen. You know, regimes come to an end, and you end up in situations where, you know, prime ministers and presidents move on. So it's not without precedent. But I think your question hints at an even further complication, which is if the Prime Minister, for the sake of discussion, if the Prime Minister decides that he is going to step aside and he prorogues the House, so you have like sort of 3 months where the House isn't in session, I think you will see a number of people come forward and say, well, even that's not good enough. Hang on, we need a strong hand to negotiate with Trump. How are we going to manage this? And you'll see still more pressure, particularly because of Trump and the threat of tariffs, on the Prime Minister, and people saying, well, are you in a strong enough position to walk us through this moment? Of course, you know, frankly, there's no alternative. You're not going to have an election tomorrow. You're not going to have a substitute prime minister immediately. So I think that's how this thing will unfold. But you're quite right. I think that means that you'll see even more prominent moves by premiers. People will try to fill the vacuum. People will try to seize the moment. And it creates a massive ongoing management challenge for the government. And one, by the way, that was noted and highlighted in the letter from Chrystia Freeland, where she very clearly called out that she thinks these upcoming negotiations are the fundamental challenge that this government faces, and that she was not on the same page as the Prime Minister with respect to how to manage it.
Okay, CTV's political commentator Scott Reid joining us live with more on all the drama that unfolded yesterday in Ottawa.
We're not scheduled to talk to you next week, Scott. I feel like we're going to be talking to you next week, probably later this week as well. Okay, appreciate this, Scott. Thanks so much.
I'll be free trading myself. We'll be calling in from sunny California, man.
Right. Okay, thanks, Scott. Yeah, you too. Take care.